What's going on, everyone? My name is Burke, and today I'll be bringing you the Week 8 power rankings for the PIC. Now, this video will be a little bit shorter because unfortunately there was a forfeit this week. The Detroit Steel Wings, coached by CrimsonCBad, forfeited against Juan, coach of the Amityville Haunters. So Juan gets a 3-0 victory. So there's only going to be 16 to talk about, but let's not waste any time and go straight into my number 10. And at number 10, I have Carson and the LA Doublades. This was an odd battle. I think the biggest thing with this is he was not prepared for a pseudo-rain team, and especially a shell-smashing Omastar, because Omastar got 4 kills this week, which normally you don't normally see an Omastar getting 4 kills in a week. You don't even see Omastar normally doing anything ever. But he sacked off his Sylveon early just to get damage off in the Omastar. I don't really understand. I think he could have Wish Protect to try to stall out the rain turns. But then again, also, he probably didn't want to let Omastar get a free shell smash up, but after you just saw him scalding, he probably could have at least gone for at least one protect to stall out some of the rain, but you know. He got really lucky with a Stone Edge miss. It was a bad play staying on the Lando. You need to scout for a Scarf Lando, and he didn't scout for it all, just stayed in with the Thunderous, went for the Hidden Power Ice. The Stone Edge misses, and he's able to take out the Landorus Therian with his Thunderous, which was very lucky on his part, which allowed him to maintain some momentum on his side of the field. He did do a good job of keeping rocks off his side of the field, found opportunities to spin them away, and good job burning things with the Wheezing. It prevented the Omastar from sweeping outright, just cleaning up the game at the end, because had he not burned the Omastar, I'm fairly confident that that would have just been a 5-0 sweep at that point, and Omastar would have gotten the rest of the kills. But because it was burned, it died. But Carson had to sack off 3 Mons, Thunderous, Sandslash, and Wheezing just to stall out the turns of burn and make sure it went down. After that happened, he just couldn't clean up with Tyrantrum and Victini. Basically, Talonflame was there, and Scarf Victini couldn't do anything to the Talonflame, and because rocks were up, it couldn't switch in and out freely, and Talonflame was just able to really clean up the game at the end. So, unfortunately, yeah, you got to prepare for everything, even a possible shell smashing Omastar, which I know you probably don't see coming, but it is on your opponent's roster, and you have to make sure you have something for that. Priority, anything like that would have helped, but he didn't have it this week, and it really showed because Omastar is picking up 4 kills in 1 week. It was a tough loss, but I think this is good to learn that even the NU picks or the RU picks that you look at and say, he's never going to bring that. He could bring that, and then he could sleep with it. So at number 9, I have the Meath Mamoswines, coached by Potato Jim. Overall, he had a very defensive team this week, and it seems like you like to play a more defensive, bulky offense style, which his draft just does not reflect. He's got a lot of frail offensive things, and he seems to bring the more defensive stuff. So maybe, next season. I know he doesn't like his draft this season, but next season, you just keep that in mind. Let's draft some bulky offense. He did a good job toxicking the Zapdos, wear it down well, and able to really wear it down, the Zapdos, with chip damage and toxic damage, it eventually going down to the toxic a little bit too early, but without the Zapdos, he saw an opportunity to set up the rocks again, and he did. He set up the rocks, and what that did was put a lot of threats on his opponent's team on timer, specifically the Sneasel, the Entei, and the Togekiss. It was a bad switch on Jim's part going into the Gengar on the knockoff from the Chinchino. I know he thought that Chinchino was scarfed and it was probably going to be going for a tail slap, but there was literally no reason to make that switch. Tangrowth was unneeded at that point. Everything takes it down reliably well. Aside from maybe the Sneasel, it could take a hit from the Sneasel, but even still, Tangrowth just would have been easily 1v1 by pretty much everything else on Hawker's team. The crit sucked. Probably should have gone for the Milk Drink first, but you can't predict crits. And after the Miltank got critted and then died, I think he played well enough without it to make sure that he won the game. He made sure that the rocks were up, and with the rocks up, he put all of his opponent's Mons on timers, and that pretty much saved the game from him at that point, because
Sneasel, every time it switches in, is taking 25%, plus Life Orb damage, so that's another 12.5%, and it's going to go down pretty quickly with the rocks up. Same with Entei. Entei is going to take 25%, and same with Togekiss. Togekiss is going to take 25%. So Sneasel went down relatively early due to some good switches, switching in the Reuniclus on an Ice Shard, and then the Sneasel going down. Once the Sneasel went down, the game was pretty much done at that point because Reuniclus just sat on the field and killed things. So good game on Jim's part. This was definitely a battle that he maintained momentum throughout. I think he played very well, and if he keeps playing like this, I think he can get his dream of going 5-5 for the season. Hope he keeps playing this well. At number 8, I have the Detroit Steelwings. There was a forfeit, so not talking about him. And at number 7, I have the Dallas Darmanitans, and they have a bye week, so they're not being talked about either. So at number 6, I have the Bury Butterfrees, and this week I don't think Hawker played that well. His sets are starting to get a little predictable, like he's bringing defensive Zapdos almost every week. And something I noticed that was off with the planning. They're very standard EV spreads. I don't know if this is just kind of like a preview and then he actually has the real EVs and everything like that, but it doesn't seem like there's any speed creeping at the least. Like, you don't need max speed for Sneasel when the fastest thing on your opponent's team is a Thunderous Eye, which gets up to 111 base speed, and Sneasel's base 115. You can put some of those EVs into HP, into defense, special defense. You can do that more with your Scarfers. Same thing with Juancito. It doesn't need to be max speed because your opponent's Mons don't get that fast. So it's just a waste of IVs. He let his Zapdos get toxic and then just let it go down real early. He didn't even attempt to preserve it, and I don't really know why. It dealt with a lot of Jim's team well, so it didn't make much sense to me why he let it go down early. And then he also went for defog when there was no rocks up. I don't know if he expected the Miltank to outspeed and set up rocks, but you saw that the Miltank doesn't outspeed. So that was just kind of a wasted turn where he could have roosted or done something. And he just didn't seem to bring a hard enough hitting team to deal with all the bulk on Jim's side this week. And there really wasn't just enough hard hitting wall breakers. Yes, the Entei was choice banded, but even then, that's still, it's not enough, especially when your opponent has a Miltank, which is very obviously going to be brought because it has sick fat. Nice play knocking off the Gengar on the switch in. It was probably the safest play at that point because Tail Slap wasn't really going to do anything, and you could at least knock off the leftovers on the Tangrowth. So good play on that. It at least took away a very offensive threat on Jim's side, so good job on that play. And he brought back a little momentum with the lucky crit on the Miltank, but again, seeing as he let the Zapdos go down, and that was what had defog, his offensive threats are going to get worn down extremely fast. And what ended up happening was the Sneasel can only switch in a limited number of times, went down to Life Orb. The Entei, he sacked that off to an Earthquake, and Togekiss can only switch in a few times, and it's really easily walled by the Reuniclus, and he was just constantly being forced out, and what happened was his team got whittled down to the point where he couldn't make a comeback. So I think it was kind of poor playing this week. The planning, I want to see some different EV spreads than just the standard 252, because that most of the time that's just a waste of EVs. You don't need, like, for most part, you don't need all the speed EVs. It's not necessary. I just think the playing was a little bit off. Rocks hurt your team so much, you need to keep them off the field on your side, so you have to keep the Zapdos around to make sure that rocks don't stay up. But hopefully he'll keep that in mind for future weeks if he brings a decently rock weak team, to make sure he keeps his defoggers and spinners alive long enough to make sure he can keep them off the field. At number 5, I have the Denver Blitzels. Now, they actually picked up a pretty big win against the Cape Arboks this week, handing the Cape Arboks their first loss. He had a cool set, Choice Band and Gramble. You don't see that very often, and Gramble does have a pretty high attack stat, so it can do quite a bit of damage. You let Chansey's Eviolite get knocked off just to get a light screen, which didn't even matter. Like, I guess Screen's Chansey is cool and all, but the light screen wasn't going to do anything. good teching the knockoff on the Venusaur. It allowed you to hit the Bronzong and not just get completely walled by it. And he scouted the Mew's moveset really well. Found out that Venusaur actually hard-walled Mew, which doesn't really make much sense because, you think it'd have a psychic move on it. He just had very little momentum throughout this entire match. He couldn't seem to get ahead at all, but there was one big turning point in the match where he actually took down the Raikou with Earthquake from Nidoking. And what that did was gave an entry for Slowbro to actually start setting up, because the thing was, every time Slowbro came in and tried to set up, Raikou came in and forced it back out. Because even at +1, Raikou's going to deal massive damage to Slowbro with Thunderbolt. And once he took down the Raikou, he found time to set up with the Slowbro on the Bronzong, on the Alomola. Those two things couldn't do much to Slowbro, and he could just set up. And once he got up to Calm Minds, he basically won at that point, because there wasn't really much that his opponent could do. His opponent didn't have any Toxic on his team, and the only thing that the Cape Arboks could hope for was some confusion hacks with Chatter, but that didn't work out for him. So he broke through the confusion hacks, luckily for him, and just won the game at that point. So Slowbro really put in the work this match. I think he really knows how to use Slowbro well, which is a very good Modern League format. I think it's very underrated. It just can do a lot of different things, and he's using it very well, and I like to see that. So Slowbro gets a pretty big sweep, picking up a big win for the Denver Blitzels against the Cape Arboks. And I thought this was a really, really well-played match. Yeah, he didn't have a lot of momentum going into the match, going throughout the mid game, but that late game he played very well. He knew he could set up, and he made sure to set up on things that were fairly passive, like the Bronzong, and then just scalded everything to death. So at number 4, I have the Kutztown Krookodiles. Now, he brought some interesting sets this week. Rain, Dance, Jirachi. That is not something you see very often, and Omastar actually made an appearance, and he used Omastar so effectively this match. Like, he is using his low tier stuff really well. I really like how he's using Cacturne in past weeks, and I really like how he used Omastar this week. His opponent didn't really prepare for Omastar, and he used that to his advantage. He took down Sylveon very early with the Omastar, which was great for him because Sylveon is the only thing that can kind of wall Omastar. Without the Sylveon alive anymore, it gave him more of an opportunity to make sure he could set up and then just kind of sweep with Omastar. Really unfortunate Stone Edge miss. Lando could have put in a lot of work, as Carson didn't have too much for it, and aside from the wheezing. But even then, Scarf Lando deals with things like Victini decently well. It deals with things like the Tyrantrum pretty well, but unfortunately, that's how Mons work, and Lando misses a Stone Edge. I think you need to train in the mountains a little bit more, and HPS just takes it clean out. And because of that, he lost quite a bit of momentum, but he was able to bring it back, actually using Wheezing as a setup opportunity for both the Jirachi and the Omastar. Once the Omastar set up a Shell Smash, it blew through 3 Mons, no problem. If it weren't for the burn, that would have just been a clean sweep, and the game would have been done at that point. But the burn does take it out, but he made sure to preserve the Talonflame at the end when he knew he could clean up with it, because Victini was scarfed, it was locked into Searing Shot. He just kind of stalled it out until he was forced to switch. When he switched out, the Victini was dead, and the Tyrantrum wasn't able to take down the Talonflame. It was too low of HP because he close combated it with a Hitmontop before, which took it down quite a bit. And then Talonflame just cleans up the Tyrantrum's HP, and the Victini can't switch in anymore, and that was just game for the Kutztown Krookodiles. And I just want to say, he's just been seeing low tier Mons putting that much work like Omastar is just like so cool to see, because you never really see those things get sweeps like that. It got almost a 5-0 sweep right off the bat, and that would have been really cool to see. Unfortunately, it was smart on his opponent to burn the Omastar, but really good game. Had the Stone Edge miss not happen, I think it would have been even a stronger differential, but hacks happens. But it's good that he didn't let himself go on tilt too much for it, and was able to still pull out a win despite the Lando going down. And at number 3, I have the Carolina Castforms. They had a bye week, so moving on to number 2, I have the Amityville Haunters, and they had the forfeit, so moving on from him as well. And at number 1, we have the Cape Arboks. This was his first loss of the season, and I'm not moving him down for his first loss because it's his first loss. I mean, it's 8 weeks in and he finally loses, so he's been doing really well, so I can't move him down for that. But he brought some relatively standard stuff for him, like AV Raikou. I mean, they're good sets. The Mew set, he was able to be a little bit creative with, and it was a life or physical set, which is great, but nose and headbutt for the Venusaur, that is very odd, because I know he wanted to have some momentum, but nothing for the Venusaur. He couldn't touch it, and the Venusaur was able to just take it down. He uses Walls effectively to take down the Chansey, knocking it off, and then Drain Punching it with the Mew, and the Mew got all its HP back because Chansey has a very high HP stat. No Defogger this week, but the rocks didn't really hurt his team anyway, and he was able to use Wish Passing with Alomomola very well to get back up the Bronzong's health every time it went down decently low. And Bronzong and Alomomola were just kind of set up for the Slowbro this week. No Toxic to wear it down, and this was a problem in past weeks when people faced the Slowbro. They didn't bring anything to Toxic it, and it was just able to kind of sit on the field. You need to bring Toxic or something to wear it down, and he didn't. And what ended up happening was the Slowbro was able to set up on him, especially once the Raikou went down. He held the momentum well throughout, but that one misplay, letting the Raikou go down too early when you had a decently safe switch to the Nidoking being the Bronzong, and he lets the Raikou go down. Yeah, he had a pretty strong lead, but he would not be able to keep it up because he has nothing to deal with the Slowbro. And you could tell because once the Slowbro started to set up, he had to try to rely on confusion hacks using Chatter to take down the Slowbro. It did not work, and he tried, I don't know, some Wish Passing or wishing with the Alomomola. I think that was really unnecessary. He should have just let it go down at that point because there was literally nothing he could do. If he had Toxic on the Alomomola, then I could understand trying to Wish Protect and, stall it out, because then he would be able to take it down. But he didn't have Toxic, and it just kind of seemed like unnecessary stalling of the match. But either way, I think he played well, except for that one play with Raikou. It can be that one play that just costs you the match, and I think it did for this week. And the planning, I liked it, but at the same time, just make sure you have at least one status user, one thing that can Toxic, because you don't know if that's ever going to come into play, and this week it really would. Because, yeah, Shadow Ball to hit the Slowbro is nice, but Toxic to hit the Slowbro is even better. But that's just what happens in planning. So anyway, that is going to wrap up the Week 8 Power Rankings for the PIC. Hope you all enjoyed. I know this is much shorter than in previous weeks just because there's not as many battles to talk about. So hopefully next week we'll be back on track with 8 teams to talk about. That's all I got for today. My name is Berk, and I will see you all next week.